Hello and welcome to Sitting Ducks. We have for you our local election special, which is especially monumentous today as one of our hosts, Gabriele, is now Councillor Gabriele. How does it feel to be our youngest local councillor?
Interesting. I wasn't expecting to win, but I did. I just squeaked through with 14, 15 votes.
After the recount, 15 votes, right? So it was 14 votes and they called a recount and we went up by 1.
Yeah. We can go into the by-election, but why don't we talk more generally about the national picture more broadly? Labour lost a lot of seats, obviously. The Greens and Reform have gained some seats. Liberal Democrats have gained some seats. Conservatives lost far fewer than was expected.
Yeah, it's definitely being seen as a mini victory, or like there's
exactly,
no
it is a mini victory. Especially in my borough, where we gained seats. We gained 12 seats.
And we also have a super majority now with the Conservative Party.
Yes.
So nationally, and I guess with your local experience, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because the left-wing vote was split between Green and Labour and all the independents standing, or do you think there was this right-wing upsurge?
I don't think there was a right-wing upsurge in London, and that's because at the count we can see in real time where the votes are, where they're coming from, and of course the results after show what happens, and that Reform didn't get many votes at all, far fewer than the Greens did, where I was standing. So not really a right-wing surge like we saw in the county council elections, and that may be due to Nigel Farage losing steam, Reform losing steam. I think the common perception is that Reform is like massively growing, accelerating party towards the next general election, which they still may win. However, I think they've probably capped out on the amount of voters they're going to have by now.
Yes, especially in the metropolitan.
Yeah, exactly.
Areas, right?
Especially in cities. I think they've definitely reached. They've sort of saturated. However many votes they've got right now, I think that's as good as it's going to get for them, and it's enough to, I think, win a general election, or maybe win most of the votes. They might have to form a coalition, but talking about the local elections specifically, yeah, they did not surge at all in London. Afterwards, Farage came and he made a speech, and he had to sort of explain away his a little bit embarrassing loss in London. He was like, "Oh, but London is like a foreign country."
I saw that, and I think that was really interesting, given the anti-immigration platform he's running on, that the places with the highest immigration don't seem to agree with Farage that immigration is a problem. Like, that might be a, obvious statement to make, but I think it's really interesting that the councils he did win in London, Havering and Thurrock, are basically Essex, right? They are not really what you'd consider the central London catchment of, highly young and highly immigrant-heavy areas.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the point I think being made is that there are demographic differences in cities where there are high levels of immigrants, foreigners, people who aren't English, say. But that's always been the case, and that's why I think Green does so well. And these aren't all foreigners voting for the Greens. A lot of it is white English liberals.
But traditionally, they would have gone for Labour.
Sorry?
So traditionally, those people would have voted for Labour. So what specifically do you think put them off Labour? And I'm talking about like the London, Labour heartlands voters.
So I think traditionally they would vote Labour, especially under Jeremy Corbyn, which was a very left-wing time during Labour's period. They probably feel disenfranchised right now when there's more of a centre-left, more of a centrist influence in Keir Starmer. But they came into the general election with a very broad church. There's a huge Islamist vote, Islamist contingent in the Labour Party right now, and a lot of progressives, far more progressive than Starmer or a few of the cabinet. But we have to understand is that in the cities, the Labour voter is very different from the Labour voter in the counties. We were campaigning in the counties in 2025, I think, for the county council elections, and you'll see a lot of Reform voters that are ex-Labour voters, and that's because they're working class. They're working class, like union members that vote Labour because for economic reasons. They feel like a sort of solidarity with that identity of being a worker, etc. And that's just not the case in the cities. In the cities, it's more of the progressive left wingers that made up the Labour vote, especially under Corbyn. And now they have a new populist to follow, which is Zach Polanski, which is, I think, a horrendous man. But
this is interesting because if you look at the Green Party's actual policies, especially around drug legalization or decriminalization and legalizing sex work, prostitution, do you think that a lot of necessarily like ethnic minority voters agree with these policies, or do they just see it as a single issue? Israel-Palestine voters found that Green were the only party very outspokenly against Israel.
And that's exactly right. I think there are possibly 3 factions of various sizes within the Green Party right now. I think it's the progressives. So these are your traditional, very woke people, very left-leaning, self-flagellating voters. A lot of them would be white. They'd probably be from this country. Then you'd find the Islamist vote, which is the immigrants from Muslim countries that are voting on sectarian grounds for issues like Israel-Palestine, but other issues also, because they sort of can find common ground with the progressives, not because they agree on things like gay marriage or any of the actual progressive things that the progressives believe in, but because they are permissive. Solely because the progressives see these people as minorities, and that gives them a sort of inherent value, and it would be virtuous to uphold their ideas so that they have a voice in that party for that reason. And I think there's a small third contingent, which is, I would say, the communists, or more precisely the Marxist-Leninists, however you want to say it. These are economically left-wing people, very left-wing. These people would be very much on the wealth tax ban, anti-capitalist. These people aren't necessarily progressive. You'll find all sorts of people in this camp. They just believe that they don't believe in capitalism. They don't believe in market. They like Marx communism. And they're economically left wing, and a lot of them will buy into a lot of progressive issues. They may buy into the big Israel-Palestine stuff, but these people might not be in favor of immigration. If you think about figures like in America, like Bernie Sanders, these people tend not to be massive open border people, because they want to preserve the domestic workforce.
Yes, yeah.
And they're like,
so
they sort of might counteract with it may sort of conflict with the Green Party's stated no border policy. They want a world without borders. This is sort of their ethos. And a lot of these people, these economically left-wing people, might also find a home in reform. And I think that may be a contingent in the counties, especially. That are voting for the Reform degree. That's why you may find a lot of Reform Green waverers, and that's that economically left-wing contingent that aren't necessarily progressive.
So if you were to kind of extrapolate the results of this local election in London specifically, or nationally, do you think that these are going to map onto the next general election? And how do we think the people will vote when it comes to, you know, Green versus Reform in about 3 years?
I don't know. I think it's a long time, obviously, until the next general election, and I have a suspicion that the sort of charm and charisma that some people have convinced themselves that people like Zach Polanski and Farage have will diminish. I think Farage comes in cycles. You see, he's been in politics for he's been in politics for a very long time, but he hasn't been influential for all that time. He comes in cycles. He was very influential in the lead up to Brexit, and then he sort of disappeared for a while, and then he became very influential again, obviously after the 2024 general election, or like just before it when he decided to run last minute. So I think he comes in cycles. I think people get bored of him, and I think the same thing applies to Zach Polanski. He was sort of a figure in the Liberal Democrats a while ago. I find him incredibly cringe when he was Liberal Democrat, but I think a lot of Liberal Democrat messaging is cringe. But he's even more cringe now that he's in the Green Party. And I think this will start to grate on people, especially that Islamist and non-progressive contingent in the Green Party. I don't know how long that alliance will hold. I don't know how long he will be popular for, because he's had a horrendous last few weeks with interviews he's given. The entire centre ground, as well as obviously the right-wing ground, doesn't take him seriously at all. He's not literate in any sort of economic matters. I think this will start to be more and more obvious the more he gets exposed, or the more light is being shone on him. No.
I think you're right.
So I don't know how well they'll hold up in 3 years' time. It's impossible to say, I think.
Of course, but if we were to just kind of speculate on how good they are at holding on to power and maintaining this momentum, like we've already mentioned, that Reform probably haven't got as much momentum this year as they have last year, and Zach Polanski seems to be a man of like contradictions, trying to unite these three very different camps. I wonder if Farage will also have this really difficult period, because as we both watched in an Atriot video yesterday, as like kind of American looking in at British politics, and
that was interesting to see a perspective of an American looking at British politics. Yeah,
it was exactly. But one graph you brought up in particular was that Farage is the guy that is responsible for a large part for the Brexit vote, and the fact that immigration shot up massively from non-EU countries after the Brexit vote, and this is kind of the non-white immigration platform that Farage is running on now. Seems to be a contradiction, and no one really holds Nigel Farage accountable for that contradiction, because now they've made this all about culture, they've made it all about anti-multiculturalism, they've made it all about non-white immigration. But Farage is the one that kind of catalyzed this, right? And I'm not saying that the Conservative Party in those years didn't do much to stop it. They didn't do much to stop it, but it was kind of the only compromise they could make once you remove EU Labour. So do you think that he'll be able to hold on to this position, this man of contradictions? And do you think that these extreme, left and right parties inherently are having to placate very different competing interests within their own party? And will this actually continue for the length they need it to win an overall majority to form a government?
I think in terms of Farage, his success in being very slippery and not having things stick to him, like failures of Brexit, like the fact he was very against Eastern European immigration before Brexit, and now post-Brexit, he's very against immigration from other parts of the world, but that was directly caused by Brexit. The thing is, he's slippery because him and his followers, maybe inherently being a populist, have a sort of victim complex. He's sort of a bit of a crybaby. If you see him in interviews, he does the sort of populist Trumpian thing that, oh, you're always attacking me. So you sort of feel, I think that presenters sometimes interviews sort of feel bad, almost bringing things in the past up, or people, because they'll be lambasted in the comments. You're bullying. I mean, what is a bully's victim? Is a bully's victim is a victim, right? So it sort of demonstrates how they see him and how he sees himself. He sees himself as a victim. So if you criticize a victim, now you're the bad guy. So I think that's why that's how populists sort of slip through. They can go from one failure to another, and nothing really sticks to them, because if you bring anything up that they've done before, that's like the uniparty attacking them. That's the media.
That's the establishment.
Yeah, exactly. The establishment, all different parts of this, establishment sort of deep state attacking them, because and then also necessarily baked into this is the idea that if you're being attacked by the establishment, it means you're right. Necessarily, it means like they're trying to hide something. I mean, but it could also just as easily mean that you're just wrong, right? So your ideas are stupid.
It's a way
and
of
I think we see every time. Yeah, we see every time that the ideas are in fact stupid when they come to fruition, but nothing sticks to them. But I think this sort of, again, as I said, he's sort of cyclical, because I think there's only so much that the electorate can take with this victim mentality stuff. That's why I think you saw Trump. He managed it for an election, and then he sort of lost the next election, and then it sort of the cycle repeats, because you sort of forget, and then he can sort of get away with that same game again. I think in the same way Farage. I think by the next election that act will get old.
Interesting.
And compounded with the fact that his county councils by then are going to be so fed up with the mismanagement, of course, because they've elected so many new councillors that don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're running the county councils up into the ground, and in the Midlands. So yeah, they'll be fed up with that as well. So yeah, I don't know if he'll do well, especially as he's already reached saturation points with those. And I want to add another thing. He didn't do as well as he did this year, last year in the county council elections. He didn't do very well in these elections. He still gained seats. I'm not lying. There were gains. He did better than the other parties. However, he also spent a lot more money than other parties, but by far. And again, that's something I don't know how sustainable that is. Yeah.
So I want to bring it, zoom it into local politics now, because you mentioned that lots of new councillors will be coming in, and we've seen in the reform-led councils from the local elections last year that they've not done well. They've not been able to deliver on their promise of reducing taxes or introducing efficiencies. Turns out local politics is actually more difficult than your average reform voter who got in on momentum was prepared for.
And a lot of them dropped out in their first few days, and they had to call by-elections, which is more waste of taxpayers' money, because that selection process was so lackluster.
Yeah, as a newly elected councillor yourself, would you like to shine some light on the process, like what happens now? What exactly is the role of a local councillor, and what kind of training and things will you have to do, and what will you actually be responsible for as a newly elected councillor?
So obviously it depends on the council. Councils might have different ways of doing things. They're, I think, fairly autonomous. But generally you'd be shown the ropes by your group, existing councillors. You'd if you're controlling the council, you might sit on committees, and I guess you would be able to speak to your leader in regards to which committee you would like to sit on, whether it be planning or children's services or licensing, whatever you're interested in. And after a few years of having experience in the various committees that sort of make the broad decisions, not broad decisions, more narrow decisions, you can sort of look into joining the cabinet and the council, and they sort of have more oversight. But it's
do you have to vote in line with your group?
Sorry?
As a councillor, do you have to vote in line with your group? So is it your group leader that decides how all the councillors are going to vote? Is there a whip system? How does it work?
So there is a whip. So you are whipped. I haven't done a vote yet. So obviously I've just been elected.
We'll ask you again.
Yeah, when there's a full council meeting, you generally vote for things. There's motions. You might be whipped. You tend to want to sort of hash out any disagreements before a full council meeting. You want to have sort of policy disagreements and stuff in private, because there's always a group meeting beforehand, before the full council meeting, so you can argue there. sort of present a united front in the council, in the full council.
Are there any mechanisms in which you can have like a different picture to the national party, or like hold the national party to account? Is there any groups of councillors or groups of people that help inform MPs of what their local area thinks? Because I'm just thinking about the analogy to like US politics, and you have, you know, a party that's just won the presidential election. You tend to have a Congress that is, you know, swings the opposite way. Do we see like similar cycles of, you know, the local councillors tend to be of a different party to the national MPs, for example?
Yes, you do. I think now a lot of the shadow cabinet, Kemi and James, they now have councils which are reform, and they're the MPs for these areas in Essex. Yeah, I suppose there'd just be less cooperation there. I think there are some projects or various things that the MP might have to sign off on, as well as the council, so there might not be as much cooperation there. But I can say I can say from personally, because I've only been a councillor for 2 days. I think obviously the leader of the group, the leader of your group will not like the answer to this question. But I think if you have a councillor or councillors that are elected in very marginal wards, that are sort of like purple, they're very marginal, they're red and blue. These sort of purple wards, you might find that there are some issues where it's more beneficial for the councillors representing those people to vote along with the residents' wishes and views, rather than vote as a block. Especially if, I would say probably only if, you're going to win the vote anyway. I mean, if your council has a supermajority, but you have some purple seats where you have councillors, you're not really losing anything. You're not really losing anything apart from optically by allowing them to vote with their residents. They're going to be more popular with their residents, and you're going to pass your legislation anyway.
Yeah.
So there are like edge cases like that. This happens a lot in America, in the Democratic Party, and I suppose the Republican Party as well. They have these sort of purple seats where there are like there's one senator from the Republicans and one from the Democrats, and the Democrat might be like a right-wing Democrat, and they will vote with the Republicans in some things. But the thing is, the alternative would be that you just don't have a member of your party in that seat. You have a member of the opposition. And I think you'd rather have a member of your party. You can still strategize and say, look, we're going to win this vote anyway, vote however you like, especially your particular area.
Okay, you're back. Lovely.
Did you lose it? Did I drop out?
I think it sped up everything. I think the recording should have captured it.
Okay.
Whatever you said. Cool. So I want to go back to the leaders of the parties now, and we've spoken already about Farage, who seems to be quite a cyclical man. We'd be remiss to not talk about the man of the hour, or the defeat of the hour, Keir Starmer, who, in my view, is the opposite. He's the most steady since Corbyn, clung on to leadership power and seems very unwilling to let go, despite the unpopularity of his party, himself. Many calls for him to resign. But he seems to have this amazing ability to just ignore it all, block it all out, and say, no, I'm continuing. And do we have any thoughts on whether Keir Starmer will be able to continue as Prime Minister after this?
So, to put it in perspective, the opinion polls, I think Keir Starmer is one of the lowest polling leaders in the world. I think he has like half the approval rating of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And if he was a Conservative, he would be gone by now. He'd be removed by now, because the Conservatives have the 1922 committee, which is a He's basically a sort of institution within the Conservative Party that can ruthlessly change
Replace the
leaders.
leader. Yeah.
Yeah, replace the leader after win. But it's not. They don't really have that in the Labour Party. Trade unions are involved. You can lose a vote of no confidence in the House as Jeremy Corbyn did, and just plough on. He said, "No, I've been chosen. I've been selected by the membership. I'm ploughing on." So despite losing a confidence vote in the House, so yeah, there's just not really the mechanism to remove Keir Starmer. I don't think he's going to go.
And it's really
regardless of the
interesting
national,
to say that
regardless of
he's
the
been.
polling.
It's really interesting to say he's been chosen, given that Labour only won 30-ish% of the overall vote share. It was a lot of, reform coming in, splitting the right-wing vote, and people using Labour as a protest vote. Now, Keir Starmer has come out saying that these local elections were just like a protest vote, and people still want his party, and people still want his change. Do you think this is like blind ideological like perseverance almost in the face of all these negative signals that show that people don't like him and don't agree with what he's doing? Because
I mean, clearly people don't like him. Regarding what he's doing, I don't know if. I think it might be more vibes rather than specific policies or things that he's doing that people disagree. I don't know.
Well, he seems
I
to
suppose it depends
survive
how plugged in you
scandal
are.
after scandal. This is what I mean. He seems to not want to do nothing about all the terrorism attacks we're having. Seems to do nothing. He doesn't want to come out on any stance. Seems to be destroying our relationship with the US. Many calls.
Well, that was inevitability. I mean,
like there's scandal after scandal, right? There's things that the populace seems to not have a very high opinion of what Keir Starmer is doing. He's focusing on bringing in a new advisor for women and girls at a time when everyone is concerned about, wars and defense and energy prices. And is he just in my opinion, they all came in with like this fixed agenda of, look, these are left-wing issues now that we need to focus on because we've not been able to do that for the last 14 years. And it doesn't matter like what state of like the economic cycle we're in. It doesn't matter what state of global like wars and international relations we're in. We just have to deliver on this wish list of items that we wanted to implement into policy for a very long time, including, for example, raising the minimum wage and standardizing everything at the cost of, having massive turbulent effects of this is not the right time to do these things and maybe you should wait. And I think it's almost as bad as when Liz Truss wanted to give like a massive tax cut to the middle class just after the effects of, COVID and the economic recovery. It just seems that these two, Starmer and Liz Truss, are actually very similar in that their ideological position means a lot more to them than the state of the country and the state of their party.
But maybe you can shed more light on what Rachel Reeves is doing is bad for business, bad for the economy. I think you'll probably talk about the. It's
always designed to be, in my opinion. I don't think they actually took the feedback, apart from doing as little as they can to make sure it's we're not increasing our deficit.
Things like the national insurance.
Yes, so things that have actively. So we had quite a rocky start to employment and the job market, even when Labour entered this, and people could see that the situation was going to get worse because then AI came in, and people were afraid of being replaced by AI. And then what did Keir Starmer do? He made it more expensive for businesses to handle businesses to employ UK workers. So now our youth unemployment rate is much higher than the rest of the G7. So you can't blame just like economic forces and wars and everything for this. It's a specific policy change that they came and did and made young people even less attractive to employ. So this I'm trying to draw parallels to Liz Truss and her mini budget in terms of they have a position, socialism, whatever, workers' rights, whatever. They know they want to implement it in their term before they run out of time and they can't pass any more laws. And they seem to be hell-bent on sticking to their timeline of these are all the social reforms you need to put in, these are all the justice reforms you need to put in, these are all the things that we plan to do for the past 10 years. And it doesn't, like, it doesn't matter to them whether it's unpopular. It doesn't matter to them whether the party is losing more seats. It just seems to be almost like martyring themselves, saying, "Oh, yes, but we need people won't change." People like it's very. This is why Starmer gets accused of being two-faced or like not really having anything he stands for. I think he does have something he stands for, and he stands for his own agenda and wants to make that as palatable as possible and ignore all criticism, because he knows that the moment you start engaging with the nuance of whether this is the right time to do this policy, it's weakness. So he has this perfect like personality almost for being, I'm going to push through all of these changes and then I'm going to be a scapegoat at the next general election. But that's fine because I would have won morally.
Yeah, I agree. There was a period that, I mean, there was a period at the beginning of the Starmer administration where the Starmer government, where we thought, okay, they're doing a lot of unpopular things. And this was supposed to be sort of front loading various unpopular policies. Like I think that cutting various benefits, or do you remember what were they doing? They're doing various things that their voters really weren't happy with. And we
like
thought, okay,
there's sort of benefit cap and all of that.
Yeah, all this sort of stuff. It feels like so long ago now. But they were doing all this stuff that was sort of unpopular. But the theory was, okay, they're going to do all this now. It's going to benefit the country in the medium term. So by the time the next general election comes round, it'll be so long ago they've forgotten about it. The electorate has forgotten about it, and it will also have benefited the country economically.
Yes.
But the problem, but then they U-turned on all of it, and so they U-turned on all of those policies. So they got all the bad PR and none of the economic benefits. So they sort of got the worst of both worlds. I don't know what the strategy was there. And then of course all the scandals now with the Mandelson stuff, which personally I think is a bit of a nothing burger. I know that's controversial to say from anyone that opposes the Labour Party, especially from my party. I suppose the cover up was worse. Naturally, as all things are, the cover up was worse than the actual appointment itself.
But that's the point. That's why people are angry at it, right? It's not just about, okay, we made a bad decision and we are sorry, we hold our hands up and say we've made a mistake. But no, we defend it and say, no, I didn't know about it. I did, it wasn't my fault. It was someone else. I didn't like. He's still a great guy. I'm going to support him. This is awful leadership.
And that's obviously the terrible thing. Naturally, as all scandals play out, you sort of have a phase of, okay, you've made a questionable decision, where in hindsight, or even in foresight, you probably wouldn't have made that decision again. But then the sort of public gains awareness of it, and then you start trying to cover it up, and then you start like firing civil servants that have done nothing wrong. They were just following his instructions, and that's where you sort of create. You sort of fan the flames of scandal, and it was like what started off as a bit of a nothing burger turned into a massive scandal, which was totally avoidable. And I think that's even more indicative of his bad leadership decisions, is questionable choices, not necessarily the appointment itself, which could be questionable, but the handling of the backlash. So. Yeah,
I think it almost reigns slightly Trumpian in his approach. Actually, Keir Starmer is taking the very Trump approach of just show no weakness, don't apologize, and they can't make it a media scandal worth calling for your resignation.
Well, no, but he's too late for that, because if he wants to do that, then he should have just never fired Mandelson. He should have just said nothing
exactly
about it. Yeah, Trump would just plow on.
I think. Which
could have worked, I suppose. It could have worked during Partygate for Boris. Yes. I think mere months after Boris resigning, but I saw people all over social media clamoring for him to come back, because now the sort of fervor of scandal has died down. You realize, was it really that big of a deal? He went to had some cake or whatever.
Completely. And this
In his
is,
own
I
house, by
think,
the way. This was in number 10, where he lives. Yeah.
this is actually a really great comparison, because I think after Partygate, there must have been some internal discussion within the Labour bigwigs that we must never do this, that we can never keep changing leaders, and we have to show that we are a party that is not chaotic, because the Tories have shown that they are replacing leader after leader, and that's what kind of like soured everyone's image. And having such a high leadership turnover is something that Labour is very clear that they want to avoid. But there is an extent where the Conservative mechanism for getting rid of their unpopular leaders was in the benefit of the people. At least the people didn't have to live with a prime minister that they disagreed with or hated. But Labour has almost overcorrected by saying nothing that we do will ever be so unpopular that we need to get rid of the person that helped us win this election.
Well, Starmer himself is saying
Yes.
that. I think other members of his party are saying the exact opposite. But this is exacerbated by the fact that structurally the Labour Party is set up that way, that they can't just go through leader after leader.
Yes.
As we've evidenced before with Jeremy Corbyn, who stuck around far longer than he was, than was polite to do so, like a bad smell. He's overstayed his welcome.
But I mean,
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak wasn't forced out. He resigned after he, you could say he would have been eventually forced out, but he resigned after he lost the general election. And Keir Starmer should have done the same, given, it's not a small number of seats that he's lost. It's a very clear message, and it's, impartially, to a large extent, I believe, to do with the Mandelson hangover. And I'm sure that Labour canvassers and things, there's a lot of news coverage about how they heard at the doorstep that, we like the local Labour councillors, but we just don't like what the National Party is doing. And once you've got that perfect storm of, your political foot soldiers are being, decimated because of your bad decisions, you're destroying the country and you're destroying the party. And then that's in your best interest to put the party before yourself and step down. But Starmer's not like that. Whoever has installed Starmer as the leader of the Labour Party must have something on Starmer, must have some contract with Starmer that says, you can never step down ever. We just want you to fulfill your role, our agenda at all points, and maybe
Well, I mean, maybe you could speak to this, but it's probably the institutional investors, the bond markets. Whenever there seems to be like a new poll or even a suggestion that Starmer may resign, our borrowing costs shoot through the roof, because anyone that replaces him is probably going to be more irresponsible with the economy.
Well, we're just saying
or
socialist.
I guess not more responsible, but do make
More
different things that bondholders might not like, and things that might be inflationary. I won't put a normative value on that, whether it's good or bad. I'm not going to say, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's just surprising that a left-wing party and a left-wing prime minister lets themselves be so enslaved by the financial institutions, if of course this is the case. And I think this is where the conspiracy kind of stems from, that a lot of people that were promised change and promised like the big future, like a massive support for the working class, people that were promised 1.2 million more houses being built. All of these actual Labour manifesto promises have not materialised, and what they instead have got is, Tory 2.0. Now the Conservatives are very open for being in support of the financial sector and GDP growth and, keeping institutions happy. But for Labour to try to do that, that's where it becomes a bit more conspiratorial, and it becomes a bit more, these are subtle influences from external factors, external forces, not the will of the people, because the will of the people is clear. They don't like Starmer. So I find it really interesting how, again, whoever has installed Keir Starmer into this position seems to have some kind of like leverage over him that says, like, you cannot at any cost resign. Do whatever it takes, destroy your party, fire your opponents, keep your own MPs subdued, but you can't leave as leader. And
I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe that is sort of seeing in the sort of stars more agency than there actually is. I don't know if there is like a figure controlling things. I'm maybe
Not a
maybe
figure,
I'd
not
be interested
necessarily
to
a
know who.
person, but these forces that are
Oh,
acting like that.
like
Yeah.
okay, fine, institutional forces. That's totally true.
Not just institutional, but the unions as well are institutional
Yeah.
people who are an
Well,
organization.
yeah, even now they'll say things like the unions will say things like the party needs radical change, but they won't call on Starmer to resign. They'll stop short of that.
Exactly.
So yeah, shall we leave it there?
I think so. I think I'll be really interesting to see what happens tomorrow, Monday, if this MP that is trying to get the 80 votes to call a no confidence and leadership challenge succeeds or not. Because of course, if she manages to secure a leadership challenge, then other people in the party, some of the other ministers, can join this leadership challenge despite not being the ones that suggested it or gained the votes for it. So I really hope she does succeed. I do think Starmer has to go. But in the meantime, I think local politics is going to look really interesting for the next couple of years. And we hope to keep you updated with, everything that's happening nationally and locally. And we'll catch up with you, Gabrielle, in a couple months when you've found your feet as councillor, so you can give us more insights of how things really work on the inside. You want to say anything?
No, yeah, I think you will.
Cool. Thank you so much for watching, and let us know what you think.